The phrase "timing is everything" can first be attributed to William Shakespeare from the 1599 play Julius Caesar. In modern times, it has become part of everyday life, it seems, and it is especially true in the world of thoroughbred horse racing. It is the exact case for the story we bring you today. A horse that, when the timing was right, displayed brilliance on the biggest stage in thoroughbred racing.
I remember after the race, Wesley Ward came up to my wife and said, "Hey, congratulations, you just won the Breeders' Cup Sprint." Little did he know it was Breeders' Cup Sprint a year and a half later.
Today, the Fasig-Tipton focus is on Straight No Chaser.
The Fasig-Tipton Kentucky Winter Mixed Sale, the last mixed sale before the start of the breeding season. Featuring racing broodmare prospects, yearlings, and mares in foal to their sport's top sires. Recent grads include multiple Grade 1 winner Adair Manor, graded stakes winners Fastest Flight, First Peace, Leave No Trace, Olivia Darling, and Running Bee. Kentucky Winter Mixed, February 3rd at Fasig-Tipton in Lexington, Kentucky. Where will you be?
Straight No Chaser was foaled on April 12, 2019 on an unseasonably warm day at Hidden Brook Farm, just outside of Paris, Kentucky. He was the 7th live foal produced from his dam, Margarita Friday, a daughter of Eclipse champion and Cartier champion 2-year-old Johannesburg.
We had her in Florida originally.
That's Steve Lehman, co-breeder of Straight No Chaser, with his wife's cousin, John Eaton. Steve is a retired optometrist from Mocksville, North Carolina, and he has been a participant in the industry for decades as a breeder and an owner, managing the partnership of First Row Partners, who campaigned 2-time Eclipse Award-winning filly Goodnight Olive. Steve and John's first purchase together was a mare named Desiree, who turns out to be the 3rd dam of Straight No Chaser. They also bred and raced his 2nd dam, Smile Maker, and bred and raced Margarita Friday, who was named after the Friday celebrations that Lehman and Eaton would have with their friends after the races at Saratoga. When she was ready to go to the races, Steve sent her to a young trainer that had just gone out on his own.
I got to know Chad back in the Frankel days, and it wasn't long after Chad went out on his own that we sent him this filly.
Chad Brown, then in just his 2nd full season as a trainer after serving as longtime assistant to Hall of Fame trainer Bobby Frankel, trained Margarita Friday during her 6-race career. She debuted at Belmont Park as a 2-year-old on July 24, 2009, in an off-the-turf 6-furlong maiden special weight. In that race, she finished 4th behind eventual graded stakes winner, Worst Case Scenario. Returning to the races after a year off, she broke her maiden in her first start as a 3-year-old, a 6-furlong turf race on July 18, 2010, stopping the timer in 109 flat.
She broke her maiden 2nd time out, but she had a little bit of an ankle issue, and so we decided to keep her.
After that season, she went to Summerfield Farm in Florida, owned and operated by Francis and Barbara Van Langendonk.
So we sent her over to Summerfield and started breeding her from there. Our goal and vision was trying to find the next big stallion that might come out of Florida. It seemed like every 3 years there was a stallion being coming out of Florida that would end up in Kentucky. We didn't do a very good job with that. And so we weren't really fair to her. But, she started producing. The first horse was a stake horse.
Margarita Friday produced her first foal in 2012, a filly by Pomeroy that was raced by John and Steve, eventually named Hangover Saturday, who would be a stakes winner and earn more than $106,000 in her career. But to date, her most successful foal came as a result of the breeding to the Grade 3 winner Speightster, a brilliantly fast horse with a classic pedigree.
Well, I like Speightster as a racehorse. Speightster was a horse that I saw break his maiden first time out.
Bred and raced by Windstar Farm, Speightster descended from a classic family that had been developed by Ernie Samuel's Samson Farm from their base in Ontario, Canada. Speightster was one of 4 stakes winners produced from his dam, Dance Swiftly, who was out of the champion race filly and champion broodmare Classy and Smart, a half-sister to breed-shaping sire Smart Strike. Speightster was undefeated as a 3-year-old, winning the first 3 starts of his career by a combined 13 lengths, including a win in the Grade 3 Dwyer at Belmont for Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott.
They're off in the Dwyer. And it is Hollywood Angel and Speightster out for the lead.
Retired after one start as a 4-year-old, Speightster covered his first book of mares in 2017.
So when Winstar announced that he was going to be available, I had Liz Crow check for me, and I bought the last share.
The process had changed slightly for the partnership by the time Straight No Chaser came along. After racing the first 5 foals out of the mare, an introduction to trainer and 2-year-old consigner Paul Sharp gave the duo the opportunity to bring foals out of Margarita Friday to the public market.
Just trying to produce some income. So we just start bringing every one of these pretty much to Paul along the way. Let Paul choose.
I am Paul Sharp from Williston, Florida, and I am a horseman.
From the beginning, Sharp had penciled in the 2021 Fasig-Tipton Midlantic 2-year-old and training sale in Timonium, Maryland, as the spot to point Straight No Chaser for sale.
He did everything right. He moved well. It's a beautifully balanced horse. And when we started breezing him, he just looked really nice on the track at home and didn't have any problems handling our track, which is a little deeper. So we just made the decision to take him there to give him the time to develop.
Shipping to the sale in Maryland from his Florida base, Sharp sent the colt to the sales grounds at the Timonium State Fairgrounds on the Sunday after the 2021 Kentucky Derby.
The sale that gives us time to train a couple days and prep and rest up, for the breeze show. He prepped breeze pretty much like he breezed for the sale. So I knew he was going to breeze well. His gallop out was very, very nice, and we were pretty excited about it.
After Straight No Chaser had settled into his surroundings and completed his final tasks, it was time to show what the horse could do against the clock on the first day of the Under Tack show for the Midlantic 2-year-old and training sale. Hip number 14 getting set to breeze an 8th in the far turn, consigned by Paul Sharp, agent, a bay colt by Speightster out of Mark. Heading to the track in the 4th set on Tuesday, May 11th, Straight No Chaser, who had been cataloged in the sale as hip number 14, was ready to breeze.
No, I liked the way he started and where he was at on the track. It seemed like, 2-3 off the rail was a good spot. He definitely bounces pretty nice off the track. He breezed confidently.
The official time on the board for an 1/8 of a mile breeze was in 10 2/5 of a second. 10 2, the time for hip 14. It was a similar time to what Sharp had seen earlier in the week when he prepped Straight No Chaser on the Maryland Oval. With the breeze behind them, the next step would be finding out how he stacked up with the rest of the horses in the sale. The answer to that question became immediately apparent.
He was our most popular colt that sale, and he was looked at by everybody. His gallop out was good enough to catch everybody's attention.
Among those who first took notice was bloodstock agent Phil Hager.
Yeah, I'm Phil Hager, and I run Taproot Bloodstock LLC, which is my company.
Phil was part of a team of independent bloodstock agents and employees of MyRacehorse.com to help select horses to add to the portfolio of the startup company. Founded by Michael Behrens and with the support of B. Wayne Hughes, the industry titan and owner of Spendthrift Farm, My Racehorse was launched with the idea to offer microshares to prospective buyers across the globe as a gateway to thoroughbred racehorse ownership. 7 months prior to the 2021 Midlantic 2-year-old and training sale, My Racehorse had won the Breeders' Cup Classic with Authentic.
But it's Authentic in front. He won the Derby. He won the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's Authentic indeed.
A horse that they had bought into before his win in the 2020 Kentucky Derby. Authentic would go on to be named Horse of the Year in 2020.
They hired me kind of as an independent contractor to help them at public auction, pick out horses in conjunction with Roderick Watchman. That's who I mostly reported to. He was kind of the portfolio manager and the in-between between, the agents and the company itself. As an agent, be the person on the grounds kind of, for instance, at a 2-year-old sale, watching the breeze show, looking at the horses, selecting the horses, coming up with horses that fit our orders, and then would take those directly to Roderick.
I'm Roderick Watchman, and I was the global head of bloodstock for my racehorse.
Roderick Watchman is a longtime industry professional who served in his capacity with My Racehorse from 2021 to 2023. Watchman assembled the team that would assist with purchasing horses from the 2021 Midlantic sale.
Nick Hines, who's a great judge, and Phil Hager, also a super judge. Both guys really easy to work with.
In addition to Phil Hager, bloodstock agent and industry personality Nick Sarge Hines was at the Timonium sale on behalf of My Racehorse and has assisted in the management of the career of Straight No Chaser as an advisor to the company.
My role as an advisor basically revolves around bloodstock acquisition, doing essentially inventory checks on how the horses are doing at the racetrack.
Hager was initially impressed by the breeze of Straight No Chaser on the first day.
So with him, I mean, he breezed well. He was like above average. His gallop outs were above average.
Phil was positioned on the backside of the racetrack, a place that he likes to be at for the undertack portion of the sale.
What I do is I have usually myself on the backside of the track, and I catch the gallop outs. I'll listen for breathing, watch equipment, do all those types of things. The first thing about Straight No Chaser was like the impression he made just going by me when he came out of the turn at Timonium, because a lot of horses, they hit that turn and they kind of don't know what to do, but he just kind of was steady throughout, like very athletic and agile, and just was into it, you know. So he made a really good impression on his gallop out, which was the first thing I remembered. I had good notes on him from that. If you look at him, there's no really wasted motion, and I think that makes a lot of sense the way he runs now too. He's just so fast, like there's no wasted motion. So he was into it his whole breeze. He never really balked at any point. So I like that about him too.
It was a sentiment echoed by Hines.
The amount of ground that he covered, and knowing that Timonium track, it is a bull ring, and his ability to handle the turns, at that time kind of exhibited his ability and his athleticism. In regards to workout, a 10-2 at Timonium is a respectable drill, in my opinion. It's the old saying, Jesse, and you know more than anyone, but it's not how fast they go, it's how they go fast. And we felt that he did it within himself, and loved his gallop out. And he certainly was efficient enough for us to be quite interested in acquisitioning him.
After the undertack show had been completed, Hager and Hines each went on different occasions to the barn of consignor Paul Sharp to inspect Straight No Chaser.
The one thing that I remember vividly after seeing the work and going to the barn with Paul Sharp was his mental scope. He seemed quite cerebral, but yet raw when you looked at him physically. There were a lot of not missing parts, but there were pieces of the puzzle that hadn't quite filled in yet. But in this particular case, a Straight No Chaser, he was a horse that we knew would fit to the kind of the mold that we were looking for based on pedigree and the fact that at the time, he wasn't quite as developed as maybe you would like to see a horse may in their 2-year-old season. So we felt that there would be tremendous upside knowing that he could develop into something special.
Hager also agreed that there was some filling in to do with the horse, but there were plenty of attributes to like.
The thing I liked so much about him was how racy of a profile he had. Like he had a really good angle to his shoulder, deep girth, a lot of muscle cover, down through his shoulder, like bottom part of his shoulder and forearm, and through his stifles and gaskins and everything. He was pretty narrow if you look at him in front, but he was wide behind. And I just feel like horses like that oftentimes can be pretty fast. And when you talk to Paul, which I have a lot of respect for Paul, I've bought good horses off Paul, he basically said this horse is just very easy, always likes doing his job. He's never had issues. He's just, straightforward. So that gave me a lot of confidence too. And it also kind of reinforced the fact that this is a horse that's probably not going to cost a ton, because he didn't quite do enough to really justify a huge price, but he never, there were no holes in him, so he's one you'd take a shot on, especially like if you're trying to buy for a budget.
After completing his first looks, Nick Hines could see the potential for the horse.
We basically came up with a list of, say, 15 or 20 horses, and there were multiple horses that ended up on all of our lists. So at the time, in Straight No Chaser's case, in my mind, he was a horse that was a must-have.
We would talk about specific horses and maybe kind of figure out which ones we want to keep or cut or, things like that. But I bet, like for this particular order, I probably sent him, maybe 20 horses or 25 horses or, whatever it was. And then I bet we narrowed it down to 40% of that or something to vet. And obviously he being probably one of the first ones we bid on. Sometimes you get lucky,
yeah.
Hit number 14, consigned by Paul Sharp, agent, a bay colt by Speightster at a Margarita Friday by Johannesburg.
Straight No Chaser entered the ring on the morning of May 17th, and the bids came flying in immediately.
20, 30, 30, 40, honey, we're going 50, we're going to 50, now 60, honey, we're going to 60, we're going to 60, 50,000, now 60, at 60,000, now 70.
Obviously, you hope to get him in the 50, 75 or something range, but I think 100 was kind of where we were targeting.
The approach heading into Timonium was to find 4 horses. The budget was basically 100 a horse, give or take.
95, 5, and 100. I got 95 and 100. 95 and 100 here.
With Fasig-Tipton auctioneer Danny Green indicating that my racehorse got in their $100,000 bid, the bidding seemed to slow, and my racehorse was on their way to signing the ticket for Hip 14. Then suddenly, Steve Dance, the longtime Fasig-Tipton auctioneer and bid spotter, chimed in with a bid from the back at $105,000.
He beat you 105. I'll do that. 105 at 105. 5. Thank you. Now 10. Steve's in. 1-5. 110. I got 105.
I want to say we hit 100 there. I think somebody may have come back with like a 105. And I remember looking at Roderick and just like, nodding at each other. And I think we bid again. And luckily enough, I guess that's all it took.
Go 1-5, 110. You want to give me more? I have. Now 15, 115, Steve, 115, 110, 15, 115, 115. This will get it done. 115, 110, 115. Yes or no? 110, now 15. Under here, we go. Thank you. Now up front, 110, Jody. Thank you.
Ultimately, we'd exceeded the budget at that point. So then it's a question of, do we want to push? And so we had to have just a second to make the decision, and then, yes, we punched it, and fortunately enough, the hammer fell.
While it may have been slightly beyond where the team wanted to purchase the horse, Hines credits Watchman with securing the bid on the horse early in the auction.
I'll give some credit here to Roderick. When we go to these sales, we try and get on the board early. I guess you can liken it to a football or a basketball game, but namely football, because you're wanting to, if you defer the kickoff, chances are that other team could maybe score first. We want the ball first, meaning that we want to be able to put some points on the board. And I think the strategy was clearly to get on the board early. So, and it worked out.
After the sale, it was decided that Straight No Chaser would head right to Southern California to continue his training.
Online auction is a way to buy a racehorse or a broodmare from the comfort of your own home. It's very similar to an eBay auction. The horses are offered on there for 5 days with all the videos and past performances and vetting that you would get in a normal sale without the travel and hassle of coming to an in-person sale. We feel it's important to provide more and more content to our customers about the horses they're purchasing online. So, we have Jesse Ullery and Frank Alosa closing out our digital sales. We're doing consignor interviews online. Anything we can do to enhance the customer experience is what we're going to do.
I think that's the beauty of the thoroughbred industry as it is. It's constantly evolving, and we're doing our best to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our clients, whether that's buyers or sellers. We're trying to provide the best platform that we can, and we really take pride in the product that we put forward on Fasig-Tipton digital sales. In their discussions about where to send the horse, My Racehorse had come up with the concept to find a young, up-and-coming trainer for their new venture that would allow for more behind-the-scenes access for their investors.
The idea was when we approached the sales in 2021, this particular sale at Fasig was to come in on the experiential side, meaning that we weren't maybe going to spend as much. The idea was to maybe try and find a young trainer who had upside that perhaps, he had some flair in the open market that people were aware of. And at the time was actually Andrew Lerner.
Andrew Lerner was a Southern California-based trainer who began training in 2017 and quickly found success, winning his first graded stakes race in 2019 with Queen Bee to You in the Grade 3 Bayacoa at Los Alamitos Racecourse. Retiring at age 32 to focus on other endeavors, including his young and growing family, Lerner had trained as many as 45 horses at a given time and had won at an 18% rate. As fate would have it, Straight No Chaser was turned out during the time that Lerner had decided to move on from training, but knew of another young trainer who would fit the bill that was envisioned by B. Wayne Hughes and My Racehorse CEO Michael Behrens.
The horse went directly into training that summer in 2021, and it was probably about 3 weeks into the Del Mar meet where he came up with just a small blip on the radar, which didn't require any surgery. Lerner was like, look, you've got a really nice horse here. I wouldn't press it. The one thing you'll appreciate about My Racehorse is that in every given scenario, the horses come first. And especially when you have a young horse like this, from the experiential side. So it was months after when the horse was turned out at the farm that Andrew had said that he was leaving training. So immediately the conversation came up. Dan Blacker was on the docket.
My name is Dan Blacker. I'm a trainer in Southern California, and I train Straight No Chaser.
Dan Blacker was born in Oxford, United Kingdom, and is a product of the Godolphin Flying Start program. He previously served as assistant trainer to Jeremy Nocita, Richard Mandela, and Tom Albertrani before taking out his trainer's license in November of 2011. He earned his first Grade 1 win in the Kilroe Mile with Hit the Road at his home track of Santa Anita. Straight No Chaser first arrived at the barn of Dan Blacker early in his 3-year-old season.
When he came to me at the start of his 3-year-old year, we trained him up, kind of took our time with him, but got him ready for the races in sort of late spring, early summer. And at that time, Santa Anita was finishing the meet. And we didn't really have a good spot for him at the end of Santa Anita. And so we kind of looked towards the next option, which was Los Alamitos and Del Mar. And but right from those early days when we first worked him 5 furlongs for the first time, he showed a lot of talent and a lot of speed. And myself and Joe Moran, who's the racing manager for My Racehorse, remember watching those early works. And at that point, I think I remember saying to him, like, he's the best workhorse I've ever had.
Timing, it seemed, would turn out to be everything for Straight No Chaser. After all, it was timing of the immediate success of My Racehorse that needed to acquire more horses after their Horse of the Year run with Authentic. It was timing that put him on track for the 2021 Midlantic 2-year-old in training sale. And it was again timing that led him to the beginning of his career on the turf at Del Mar, despite showing his brilliance on the dirt in the mornings.
The race at Del Mar, we pointed him towards the dirt race they put later in the first book, and they had a race at Los Al. Just because we wanted to get him going, we're pointing for Los Alamitos, and he was really ready to go. And then he had a bad scope with some mucus at Los Al, so we had to skip that race. And then there was a race at Del Mar on opening day, which was 5 furlongs on the grass. And I'd always been wanting to run him on the dirt from early days. He'd always been super impressive in his works on the dirt. But just the way that the condition book came up, he was doing so well. He was so ready. The grass race came up opening day, and the dirt race was not for another 3 weeks or something. And we just decided we had to run him.
Breaking from post 10 on opening day of the 2022 Del Mar meeting, Straight No Chaser proved that his workouts in the morning weren't just for show.
And away they go. Straight No Chaser, white cap, very fast. Honeymoon.
The Colt went straight to the lead and dashed through an opening quarter of 21 4/5 of a second, a half in 44 4, and stopped the timer in an impressive 56 2 as the post-time favorite under jockey Edwin Maldonado.
But Straight No Chaser just plain too good. Straight No Chaser wins well.
It didn't surprise me how easily he did it. I mean, I just going off his works in the morning, we knew this horse was like an absolute runner. And, you know, his pedigree would probably lean both ways. You know, he's out of a Johannesburg mare, and certainly Speightstown, his grandsire, gets both turf and dirt. So, you know, I didn't feel like there was anything to lose by running him on the grass, and you know, he won and showed a snippet of what was to come.
After winning impressively on the grass first time out, the Connections decided to keep him on the turf after showing how brilliantly he handled it. But it didn't go to plan this time in an allowance race toward the end of the Del Mar meet.
And that day, I think it was another really busy day. I think it was Pacific Classic day, and it was that weekend maybe, and it was just really busy. He drew the inside, and it was just overwhelmed him for his second start. So that was he didn't fire that day on the grass, and then that made an easy decision to go to the dirt next time.
In his first start on dirt, Straight No Chaser got back to his winning ways. In a first-level allowance at Santa Anita on October 29, 2022, Straight No Chaser went on to win the 6.5 furlong allowance race in wire-to-wire fashion, again setting blazing fractions of 21 4, 44 3 for the half, and 109 1 for 6 furlongs. Straight No Chaser completed the trip in 1:15 4/5 of a second.
But it's all Straight No Chaser. He's going to make short work of this field. Straight No Chaser wins in wire-to-wire fashion by 2.
After his impressive allowance score against older horses, it was on to the Grade 1 Malibu in his 4th career start.
He showed a lot of talent, and you know, there's only one Malibu.
While the distance may have been a bit taxing in a Grade 1 in just his 4th career start, Straight No Chaser didn't break as sharp as he had in previous races, and had to change tactics in the race, trying to come from off the pace.
Tactically, it was not an ideal situation, but I think at that stage he was kind of a horse that just kept getting better and better. And all through his 3-year-old year, I just had a feeling like he was going to improve through the year and even into his 4-year-old year. I had a good feeling that he was going to keep improving, and really, like, it was only when we got to his 4-year-old year, then, even though he had already won a few races as a 3-year-old, like when he got to 4, then he really started getting good.
Blacker was right. His 4-year-old season featured a breakout performance to pick up his first career graded stakes win at Pimlico in the Maryland Sprint Championship. But before that, it was again timing of an Oaklawn allowance race that led to another career-altering connection for Straight No Chaser.
It was on Arkansas Derby Day, and we were lucky that Johnny Velasquez was there that time to ride in the stakes races, and so he picked up the mount. Johnny just gets along so well with him, and instantly you could see that he runs for him and Johnny gets him to relax as well, even though he's on the lead. He gets him to sort of switch off and relax, and I think that's key to his brilliance.
With Velasquez aboard for the allowance race, Straight No Chaser got back to his winning ways, covering the 6 furlong allowance in 109 flat after internal fractions that included a half mile in 45 2 and 5 furlongs in 57 1. The margin of victory was his most dominating yet, 7 1/4 lengths. After that allowance win, Blacker felt it was time to try graded stakes company again, targeting the Maryland Sprint Stakes on the Preakness undercard, where he would once again team up with John Velasquez in the irons.
Obviously, ran so impressive at Oaklawn. He came into this race on a big day and a big crowd, and I was a little nervous about that, but he handled the shipping really well. Timing wise, it looked really good. The race at San Trinidad at that time was another 7 furlongs race, the Triple Bend, and this race came up timing wise, looked like a perfect spot for him. I knew he handled the shipping, and it was a pretty straightforward decision. My assistant Juan Landeros, he travels with him everywhere. He does a great job handling him.
It would turn out to be the performance that put Straight No Chaser on the map. He would take the Maryland Sprint Stakes by 7.5 lengths in a stakes record time of 1 minute 8 1/5 of a second, after again showing wickedly fast fractions of 44 3 for the half and 56 1 for the 5 furlong time.
It's Straight No Chaser! Straight No Chaser! Look at this! Win by 6. Prevalence was second. Nakatomi was third.
Just to see him run those fractions and then pull away from decent horses like Nakatomi and the Godolphin horse, it was like, whoa! He's got a lot of talent, this horse.
Nick Hines was in attendance for the races, accompanied by hundreds of owners who would become involved in the partnership of Straight No Chaser through the My Racehorse platform.
And I remember being at Old Hilltop, and I was standing there with Joe Moran by the winner's circle. I hate to watch races by the winner's circle. It was so crowded, so I kind of moved over to the next to the winner's circle because I didn't want to be that way. But what went through my mind, there wasn't a point in this race that I thought he was going to lose. And this was clearly his coming out party. To be there there must have been probably 300 partners there. And I believe this horse has about 1,000 partners at or around that number. I guess it was kind of an out-of-body experience, to be quite frank.
The euphoria and the excitement of a full 2023 campaign would be short-lived. 1 month later, it was announced that Straight No Chaser would be sent to the farm for a 90-day break following a routine exam. Entering 2024, the goal was to find a Grade 1 for Straight No Chaser that would show his effort in the Maryland Sprint Stakes was no fluke.
The first goal for 2024 for us was the Bing Crosby.
While timing had worked in the favor of Straight No Chaser to this point in his career, a lackluster comeback race in his 2024 debut at Aqueduct in the Grade 3 Run Happy Stakes put Straight No Chaser's chances for the Grade 1 Bing Crosby at Del Mar in jeopardy.
We were looking for a race for him in the spring. The race at San Trinidad, he wasn't quite ready for. So then the Oaklawn race didn't look like a great spot for him once we entered. And then the next week was a 6-horse field at Aqueduct. That looked like the move. So we went there and he stumbled out of the gate and he got rushed up and it just wasn't his day.
With no race that was suitable in the condition book, Blacker was faced with another problem of where to run the horse. And for the second time in 2024, timing was not on their side.
And pointing for that, there was no race that was between the Aqueduct race and the Bing Crosby that was like in the right spot in between those races. And he would have run if there was a race for him. There was just no race. It was either too close to the Aqueduct race to come back in, or too close to the Bing Crosby that we felt like it would jeopardize our chances in the Bing Crosby. So we just trained up to the Bing Crosby, and he didn't make that race. Unfortunately, he had an issue like 3 days before the race, which was heartbreaking.
Now, with over half the racing season already gone, everything would have to go right. The timing would have to be perfect in order for Straight No Chaser to prove that he belonged in the conversation of the best sprinters in North America.
And when he had the setback, it was, I believe, back in May, coming out of the Run Happy in New York. That was his comeback race. Things were kind of, a bit sketchy at that point because we weren't sure if the timing was going to work out for this horse.
He bounced back. We did some tests and got the all clear. We bounced back from that. We then set our sights on the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, and all his works from that point were exceptional.
In what would be just the second start of the year in the September 29th race, Straight No Chaser went to the post in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship as the co-favorite with the Bob Baffert trainee Fort Bragg, who was also making his return to the races off of a layoff.
He was really doing great coming into this race, but I was still anxious that was he as good as last year? It had a lot of time off. A lot of little things that kept him away from the races, but he was primed for this race.
Primed, indeed. If there was any question whether the talent was still there, Straight No Chaser quickly answered any who doubted. Showing his brilliant speed once again, going wire to wire in the Grade 2 race, he would once again post mind-blowing fractions of a half in 44 and 2, 5 furlongs in 56 seconds flat, before completing the 6 furlongs in 108 and 2, 6.5 lengths clear of his nearest competitor.
Straight No Chaser sizzling home in his return to the great race place.
But just to see him break so sharp and get to the lead so easy and then just put those horses away at the top of the lane, I was like just so excited, so relieved, so happy for the ownership group. And obviously, as soon as he crossed the line, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, Breeders' Cup.
The Breeders' Cup World Thoroughbred Championships, held in 2024 at Del Mar, the same place where Straight No Chaser had broke his maiden 2 years earlier. It would be here that Straight No Chaser would get his chance at Grade 1 glory, against the best dirt sprinters that thoroughbred racing had to offer. The field included 10 of the 11 runners in the race that had won a graded stakes race in their career, including Nakatomi, Mulligan, and Gun Pilot, who had all won Grade 1 races earlier in the season. Blacker worked Straight No Chaser 3 times before his scheduled start against the best in the world, and in his mind, there was one final hurdle to clear.
The main thing was the draw. Like, I was actually the most nervous at the whole week, even before the race, was at the draw. I was just like, praying that we got a good draw. And when I saw post 8, literally the first one, it was like, boom. I knew that was a great post.
Sent off at odds of 6-1, Straight No Chaser broke on top.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And it is Straight No Chaser straight to the front.
But in a slight change of tactics, chose not to display his blazing speed this time, leaving that to his challenger Federal Judge, who carved out early fractions of 21 and 3 for the quarter and a half in 44 flat.
And you could see, like, immediately, as soon as they broke out of the gate there, we had an advantage from our outside post. You see the 2 horses that showed a lot of speed, they dueled, and Johnny just got him to relax, switch off, and sit back behind them. I had confidence he could do that. I knew he wasn't just a pure speed horse. Everyone said he has to have the lead. I knew that wasn't the case.
Blacker wasn't the only one who was confident in the trip that Straight No Chaser was getting in the early part of the race.
When Mulligan took back on the outside, I looked over at Joe, and once again, we were right there in the forefront at Del Mar, right near the winner's circle. I looked at Joe and I said, "We are golden."
The tactics didn't surprise Paul Sharp either, who had made an observation in the early days of Straight No Chaser's training.
Him not being on the front, I wasn't worried about that one bit. I remembered when this horse, when we were breaking him and training him early, he was so relaxed wherever he was at, just in the barn, in the wash rack, on the tracks, being groomed, whatever. And he trained like that.
Straight No Chaser closed from off the pace to run down a stubborn Ben Tornado to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint in a time of 108 and 3/5. He earned the winner's share of $1.04 million and validated the brilliant performances that he had shown all throughout his career.
Ben Tornado and Straight No Chaser, these two coming down to the line together. Straight No Chaser and Ben Tornado. Straight No Chaser in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Ben Tornado was second, and then it was Mulligan and Gun Pilot in 108.62.
It was so vindicating to see him prove it the way he did.
It was vindication for a horse that had displayed immense talent from the first time he got to the track. For the connections who had set out to purchase a horse at public auction to compete at the highest levels of thoroughbred racing, providing an unforgettable experience for thousands of owners chasing a dream. And for a trainer who allowed the horse to find the right time to shine.
I'm just thankful to my racehorse for sending him to me and allowing me to give him the time to get ready. I think they played a big part in that, being patient as owners and allowing the horse to really reach his pinnacle.
Dan has done a tremendous job with this horse in the sense that you talk about trainers that are made for certain horses. They were very meticulous in their approach. It comes back down to how this horse was handled, how he was managed. And from an ownership perspective of my racehorse, there's no pressure on our end. The only pressure is to make sure that you do what's right for the horse.
As Straight No Chaser hit the wire, Steve Lehman was watching from the Thoroughbred Club of America in Lexington, Kentucky. Other than his box at Saratoga, it's his favorite place to watch horse racing. He was reminded of something his son said to him when the decision to breed Margarita Friday to Speedster was being discussed.
You know, I have to just thank Dan so much for doing such a marvelous job with this horse. The funny part is when Speidster was coming along, he was getting some winners. I think he was maybe top 5 his first year, maybe somewhere along that way, at least top 10. I'm not sure if he's top 5 or not. And I kept telling my son, I said, Tyler, all Speidster needs is a big horse. I said, he's getting some runners. All he needs is a big horse. Well, after the Breeders' Cup, Tyler remembered that. He looked over to me and he said, Dad, you had the big horse all along. You just didn't know it.
You've been listening to the Fasig-Tipton Focus on Straight No Chaser. This podcast was written and co-produced by me, Jesse Ullery. It is also co-produced by Thad Keston, who also serves as our editor. Our director is Isaac Wagner. Special thanks to Steve Lehman, Paul Sharp, Nick Hines, Phil Hager, Roderick Watchman, and Dan Blacker. Please like and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you found us on, and thank you for listening.